you. Yeah, yo. There whenever it matters, and even more when you feel like it doesn't. Protect you so you never feel like you wasn't. Know I'm right alongside you. Either that or I'm behind you, but always got you. End of discussion, nothing means more. First one to offer is shoulders for what you reach for. Thought I saw the eyes of the world until I seen yours. And know that I ain't see a better view yet. I'm with whatever, so don't ever you fret. Know that you covered, not a hurdle or a heartbreak. A change what a partake, cause none of them won't ever get comfortable in your walkway. My job is to aware you, fully loaded, prepare you for all of the above that I'm never letting get near you. But still in all, give you every advantage I found. Couldn't find a better fit for them, along with my crown. And since the baton was passed, I've been down. Cause failing's not an option, and dad is not a noun, not at all.
My message to any dad, man, first off, know that, yeah, it is a hard job, but it's the greatest job in the world. I wouldn't trade it for anything. I wouldn't change anything about it. Everything you're doing from here on out, if it didn't have purpose before, now it has purpose. It's the most important thing you'll ever do. Just be a dad.
Welcome to another episode of Dad Is Not a Noun. My name is Ishmael, changing the narrative for men of color fatherhood, as well as changing the narrative on the things I care about. And today, again, I'm truly honored to have my guest on today. He's been on a couple of times. You've seen him on the Majority Report, and he's back with me again, the one and only. I'm going to call, because again, I know I've seen him on episodes and they don't put respect on his name. So I'm going to put respect on his name. Dr. Zachary Foster, thank you for coming on, sir. How you doing, sir?
Thanks so much for having me back. My pleasure.
Thank you for coming on. I'm going to ask you this question. I know it sounds repetitive, but how's your heart at this moment?
My heart is very heavy. Ever since Mahmoud Khalil was detained, abducted, imprisoned by ICE agents last week, I've been really distraught. I would consider him a friend. He invited me to speak on Columbia's University last February. We had a great chat during that visit. We've been in touch since. In fact, just about a week and a half ago, we were corresponding. He was putting me in touch with members of the Columbia Palestine groups, and in order to plan another visit. So it's just really horrifying to see an anti-genocide activist, someone who is calling for human rights. It's just incredibly disturbing to see that individual, who is a permanent green card, who is a permanent resident in the United States, a green card holder, has a wife who's 8 months pregnant, be abducted for political speech. And the question, and now in the past, just the past 24 hours, we've seen another a Columbia student, be abducted by ICE. I believe now I haven't verified this reporting, but I saw at least one headline saying some 22 students have been either expelled or they have been kicked out of campus at Columbia University for political speech. So it's just an incredibly scary time to be living in the United States, a time when our elected representatives, our most senior political officials, people like Marco Rubio and Donald Trump, are imprisoning people for political speech. We haven't seen anything like this since the Red Scare, going back more than a half century.
No, and I definitely agree. And what I want to do is, if I can bring up the video, I don't know if I can bring it up. I do have the video that shows him being detained by ISIS. Because again, he didn't do anything wrong. He used his wear off when it comes to knowing his rights of being a peaceful protest, but for some apparent reason, which it doesn't make sense, that he gets kidnapped by ISIS, and now
By ICE.
By ISIS, and like now you don't know what's like the situation with him right now, and so what I'm trying to do is find the video. But while I find the video, if you want to just keep on talking about that.
Yeah, so what we know about Mahmoud Khalid's status at the moment is that he was transferred from New Jersey, where he was arrested, I believe, or where he was first originally brought after he was abducted. He was transferred to Louisiana, apparently, because, and this reporting just, I believe, came out today or yesterday, that that the New Jersey facility that he was supposed to be imprisoned in was having a bed bug infestation. It's just incredibly strange. I don't know how else to describe it. A bed bug infestation in a detention facility, so they had to transfer him to 1,500 miles away. I mean, what? No. What's very clear here is that this was an attempt to separate him uh, from his lawyers, separate him from his family, make it difficult him to present a legal defense, put him in a jurisdiction where the judges that he will be presented to are presumably more sympathetic to the kind of anti-Palestinian racism that's just so inherent in his abduction. So, this is an incredibly scary time to be living in the United States.
Definitely. I have the video right now, so I'm going to play the video right now.
Turn around. Okay, let's not. Okay, he's not resisting. He's giving me his phone, okay? He's not, I understand, he's not resisting. Like,
Don't worry about it. You're going to have to come with us. Don't worry about it. I'm coming with you. Don't worry. No one's resisting. No one's getting worked up.
you guys really don't need to be doing all of that.
It's fine.
حبيبي كيف بدي اتصل فيك؟
Take Amy. Call Amy.
Okay. Hi, Amy. Yeah, they just like handcuffed him and took him. I don't know what to do.
Yeah, it's an incredibly disturbing video. What we've just witnessed
What should I do?
is
I don't know.
And the crazy thing about it, they don't give him a reason why he's being detained.
I mean, this is an incredibly disturbing video. What we are watching here is
Let me
plainclothes ICE officers who refused
Can we get
to
a name,
show any
please?
form of
Can we get your
identification.
name? I understand the lawyer is asking for your name.
Over there. No, we don't give our names.
The lawyer's asking for your name. He's saying they don't give their names.
Oh, yeah, that's right. They'll be taken to immigration custody at 26 Federal Plaza.
I'm sorry. Can you repeat that?
They'll be taken to immigration custody at 26 Federal Plaza.
She said they're taking him to 26 Federal Plaza.
And they're just driving a civilian vehicle.
Can you please
unmarked,
specify
no
what
indication
agency
whatsoever.
is
He's
taking
being
him,
kidnapped.
please? Excuse me.
I mean, he's just literally being kidnapped by plainclothes
talking to
officers
me. I don't know.
who refuse to identify themselves as ICE officers. They refuse to explain why they were arresting him.
Excuse me.
It's a
the
kidnapping.
lawyer would like to speak to somebody. Oh my God, they're literally like.
And
It's
like you were saying, that's kidnapping in basically in real time.
in broad daylight. You're seeing a permanent resident be kidnapped by members of ICE. And what's incredibly disturbing about this whole affair is that of all the people they could have kidnapped, they chose to kidnap the negotiator, the peacemaker. I mean, they've been desperately searching for any material they could find linking him to Hamas, linking him to any kind of terror activity. And they've come up empty. There's zero evidence whatsoever to support the claim that he had anything to do with Hamas, that he supported Hamas, and by the way, even if he did, that's protected speech. There's a very, very high bar, to prove that, because it's obviously illegal to provide material support to a terrorist organization in the United States. But but even if you say I support Hamas, that's not providing material support to a terrorist organization, and that has been demonstrated repeatedly in many court cases. That in fact there's a much higher bar of evidence required to demonstrate that an individual is providing material support to a terror organization, and they haven't even found anything indicating he even has ever expressed support for Hamas. So it's just obviously insane that they're abducting and arresting him and imprisoning him and trying to deport him. Again, a person who is an outstanding member of the community of the Columbia University campus, who is beloved by his fellow students, who is a negotiator who doesn't wear a mask at protests, who's open about who he is and what he stands for, which is he rejects genocide and opposes the United States support for it. It's insane.
Yeah, and I feel like what I think I'm worried about, where you have this push against this anti DEIA, and a lot of the colleges are worried about losing their funding from the federal government. This plays a role in it too, as well as too. It's like we don't want to lose funding from the government, because if we lose our funding, then we're in a way asked out. So we have to play along with the agenda.
We've known for a long time that many of these Ivy League institutions are willing to compromise on principles of academic freedom, on principles of free speech, in order to appease their donor class. This is the case with people like Bill Ackman, the hedge fund billionaire who threatened to withdraw funding and threatened to build a coalition of other billionaire donors to Harvard, for example, and he succeeded in removing the president of Harvard last year. Now we're seeing the same thing happen at Columbia, where you have the president of ADL, the Anti-Defamation League, probably should better be known as the Apartheid Defense League, owing to its longstanding belief and support for Israeli apartheid. But in any case, the ADL came out with a statement. Was it last week or the week before? Just after Mahmoud Khalil was abducted, they came out with a statement saying we are in conversation with Columbia University in order to help them solve the anti-Semitism issue on campus. So you're seeing these. And then what did the head of the Columbia Journalism School say after Mahmoud Khalil's abduction? He said, and this is, I'm paraphrasing here, but he said something to the effect of encouraging his journalism students, especially those who are have student visas, are foreigners living in the United States, or green card holders. He said, be careful what you say. He said, don't talk about Israel-Palestine on your social feeds. Don't share a controversial content on Israel-Palestine, or even Ukraine, or even China, he said, on your social feeds. Don't write articles about what's happening in Palestine. And this is the dean of the Columbia Journalism School telling his journalism students not to do journalism. That is where we are at. He said, we, quote, we cannot protect you. Well, I'm sorry, Columbia University, it's your job to defend and protect your students. Yeah. I mean, just the total abdication of responsibility and of accountability for your own student body. It's been more than a week, and the Columbia president has not even said Mahmoud Khalil's name by name. Just vagaries about we need to support free speech and academic freedom, but not even mentioning the name of the student who was abducted by ICE. It's just a total travesty what we're seeing. The Ivy League is collapsing in real time. I mean, this is Columbia University, by the way. Also recently, Harvard University, was it a few months ago? They adopted a definition of anti-Semitism known as the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism, which says, by the way, that calling Israel a racist state is anti-Semitic. So if you're a student at Harvard University, you can call the United States racist. You could call Germany a racist country. You could call Argentina a racist country. You could call every country in the world a racist country except for one, and that is the state of Israel. I mean, it's just a Jewish supremacist university. I don't know how else to describe Harvard.
No, and it's just crazy how over a couple of years, just one, I know we talked about before, was how the Congress reshaped how we legislate the word anti-Semitic. And so that played a major role into it. And I know one of the lexicon right now on social media is FO, fuck around and find out. And so unfortunately, by changing the narrative of what does anti-Semitic means, and now it's kind of a part of our everyday lives that we have to be careful what we say, because we might be in a situation as Mahmoud Khalid. And what I want to also go into is you had, election is over, Trump won, and how like a lot of people from Michigan, especially Arabs Arab Americans supported Trump that he was going to end the war. But if you do your research, is that he doesn't want to end the war. If you go back to 2017, when he recognized Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, and that was a lot of backlash in the Middle East, and how that right there kind of led, I wouldn't say it led to October 6th, but it also became just another stack of things that people in Palestine got to a point where they got frustrated. It's like, hey, we're sick of the dehumanization of us. You know, again, I'm not a fan of Hamas, but again, when you need an outlet to be let people know, like, this is a tipping point that we can't deal with this no more.
Yeah.
And so if you want to talk about that a little bit.
Well, on the eve of the election of Joe Biden, Donald Trump was by far the most pro-Israel president in US history. And when I say pro-Israel, what I really mean is giving Israel a blank check to do whatever it wants and supporting the policies of the most far-right government ministers, including the prime minister himself, Benjamin Netanyahu. And that was Trump's policy for 4 years from 2016 to 2020, during which time he, as you correctly pointed out, he recognized Israel's illegal annexation of Jerusalem. He also recognized Israel's illegal annexation of the Golan Heights. It's, of course, illegal under international law to annex territory conquered through war. But that's exactly what Israel did in East Jerusalem and the Golan Heights, annexation, which was, like I just said, recognized by Donald Trump himself. And in addition to that, he gave Israel a green light to slaughter however many Palestinians it wanted with with no accountability, with total immunity. So impunity, excuse me. So, and then in the past, however, I would like to just make one point here, not not in support of Donald Trump, who is presenting the greatest threat to free speech in the United States in U.S. history. I think I would say, but he did get his envoy Steve Witkoff, the real estate developer. It's what's very clear is that he played a critical role in bringing about the ceasefire that was agreed to in mid-January. And I don't want to trivialize that ceasefire. That ceasefire brought an end to the mass murder of the Palestinian people in Gaza. Before that ceasefire was agreed to in mid-January 2025, the Israeli military was slaughtering anywhere between 50 and 200 Palestinians every single day in Gaza. And those were just the official numbers. We didn't actually know the unofficial numbers. The unofficial numbers were, of course, dramatically higher, owing to the fact that you couldn't pull people out of the rubble, so you just didn't know how many people were killed in each of these strikes, and you didn't know how many people were just being disappeared and killed and buried in mass graves. So those were the number that was the number of people that Israel was killing on a daily basis on the eve of the ceasefire agreement. So it's fair to say, and this is coming from someone who despises Donald Trump, it's fair to say Donald Trump saved the lives of thousands and thousands of Palestinians in Gaza. Now, having said that, in order to achieve that ceasefire, he gave Israel the green light to adopt the Gaza policy in the northern West Bank, where over the past 3 months, Israel has carried out its largest campaign of ethnic cleansing since 1967. They've expelled something like 40,000 Palestinians from their homes in the Jenin refugee camp, the Noor Shams refugee camp, and the Tulkarm refugee camp, as well as in the Tubas refugee camp, as well as around Nablus. So there's been a massive campaign. We're talking aerial bombardment campaign. You have Apache helicopters dropping bombs in civilian areas in the West Bank now. You have tanks rolling through Jenin, rolling through Nablus, rolling through Tulkarm, rolling through Tubas. So what we're seeing is, in exchange for letting up in Gaza, Donald Trump gave Israel the green light to just slaughter as many people as they wanted in the West Bank. So again, it's a complex situation. What was good for Gaza was bad for the West Bank. And now, as we've all been witnessing over the past 3 months, Israel has violated the ceasefire more than 1,000 times. That is to say, in 1,000 individual instances in 3 months. That's multiple violations every day. We're talking 10 to 15 violations a day, including killing some 90 Palestinians. I mean, can you imagine if the Palestinian militant groups in Gaza had killed 90 Israelis in the past 3 months? The headline in the New York Times and CNN would be, Hamas violates ceasefire. Every single day they would report on that. But because it's Israel violating the ceasefire, slaughtering Palestinians at will, 1, 2, 3 Palestinians killed every single day in Gaza. And there's no reporting on those violations in U.S. media. In addition, Israel has violated other terms of the agreement, including not allowing mobile homes into Gaza. The agreement stipulated that Israel was to allow in roughly 60,000 mobile homes into Gaza. And those mobile homes were supposed to be allowed to enter Gaza already in the first half of phase 1 of the ceasefire, which passed many, many weeks ago. And so Israel just completely they allowed in a few dozen mobile homes in comparison to the less than 1% of the mobile homes they agreed to allow to enter Gaza. They actually allowed in. They've only allowed about half of the fuel they promised they would allow to enter Gaza. And now, in the past 13 days, on March 2nd, 2025, the Israeli government instituted a total siege on Gaza. So they've gone back. So they've brought back the genocidal policy of starving to death all 2 million people. And the reports that have been surfacing in Gaza over the past week have been harrowing. People starving to death, literally people starving to death. And so, yeah, and this was stated as an explicit policy. So they've actually, as opposed to before the ceasefire agreement, Israel put on a roadshow. Oh, we're letting in humanitarian aid. They would, the Israeli military Kogat Twitter account would post these images and videos showing aid trucks passing into Gaza. But now the facade is gone. They've even just done away with the facade altogether. Now they've stated explicitly, 0 food, 0 water, 0 fuel, 0 electricity will be allowed into Gaza. Well, guess what? The English language has a name for that. It's called genocide.
And I think the one thing when you talk about genocide and dehumanizing Palestinian, I'm not gonna play that the thing that Trump created. It was an AI video, and he called it Trump Gaza, where he showed this video of what Gaza would look like if American troops would occupy it and make it into this almost like Atlantic City simulation. And again, it goes back to when you dehumanize people. And I know through Twitter, a lot of people wasn't cool, but again, in the current environment that we live in, is that it allowed Trump to post something like that on Twitter.
Yeah. I mean, again, I always encourage people to try to imagine if the roles will reverse. And instead of the Palestinians being depicted the way they are, and instead you have the Israelis depicted as the way Palestinians are depicted. And can you imagine a U.S. president sharing out a video, let's say of Tel Aviv, of Tel Aviv completely eradicated of its Jewish population and replaced with Palestinians and replaced with Americans and American real estate developers? I mean, could you just imagine that? That you'd have a major American Jewish organization would be issuing condemnations. You'd have every major news organization call the president anti-Semitic and declare that he's probably needs to be impeached. I mean, that would probably be the reaction if the roles were reversed. But because it's the Palestinians, and by the way, the other thing to know here is that if there was ever a population that we should say, I mean, by the way, it's always unlawful and unethical to uproot someone from their home. But it's the Israeli population that is actually, for the most, many of them have foreign passports. They come from Europe. They come from Middle Eastern countries. They come from the United States. If there was anyone that you might say, wow, to solve this problem, let's uproot them. And again, I'm not supporting that. What I'm saying is, no, that's deeply unethical. But if there was ever a population that you would say, oh, we need to remove them from Israel-Palestine, maybe we send them back where they came from, you might think, it might be the Israeli settlers Not that I'm saying that, not that I'm supporting that. Of course not. That would be deeply unethical. But again, it's the native population that
Yes.
Trump is saying need to be expunged. So it's just layers upon layers of dehumanization, and genocidal rhetoric coming out of the U.S. president.
No, 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 definitely, definitely. And the perfect thing I thought of is, let's say Putin, right, decided to say, you know what, we're gonna occupy Atlantic City, right? And he says, you know what, I think Trump did a shitty job with Atlantic City, and so we're gonna make Atlantic City into Putin City. And he creates this AI video of how Atlantic City looks like when it comes to Putin occupying Atlantic City, and there's a ghost statue on the boardwalk of Atlantic City of Putin. And he pushes all the people that lives in Jersey, in Atlantic City, and have a lot of Russians take over. But he says, you know what? We're gonna make it beautiful. We're gonna have all these wonderful things. It's gonna be big. It's gonna be the beautiful. People gonna love it, and you can be a part of it. Uh, you can be a part of it. You might be a part of it, but it's gonna be big and beautiful. A lot of Americans would not stand for that.
No, it's only something that you can do to the Palestinians, right? You can call the Palestinians, you can use the word Palestinian as a slur, as Donald Trump just did when he described Chuck Schumer,
Yeah.
U.S. senator, as he said he's not a Jew, he's becoming a Palestinian or something to that effect, which he's using the word Palestinian as a slur. By the way, the word Jew used to be used as a slur. People
Yes.
and people still use it as a slur today. You got Jewed is what people would say, which is a deeply anti-Semitic trope, But it's okay to just be deeply racist against Palestinians.
Yeah.
I mean, he's normalizing what is effectively dehumanizing rhetoric, which is the beginning of every genocide happen. Because how do you compel a group of people to accept the extermination of another group of people? First, you have to dehumanize them. You have to slur them, compare them to cockroaches, call them human animals. Right? You have to dehumanize them, which is exactly what Donald Trump and Israeli officials have been doing to the Palestinians for years. So he's contributing to the normalization of the dehumanization of millions of Palestinians, which is, in almost every case of genocide that we know of, is the first step to genocide. In order to compel a population to accept the extermination of another population, that population needs to be perceived to be subhuman. And that's what Donald Trump is doing.
Right. And it's crazy too that you bring up that too, is that when you talk about DEIA, that term has become the N-word. So anything policy wise deemed DEIA, even though they use DEI, but the terminology is DEIA. Now, because that is baked into policy now you'll say, you know what? Because it's the termin the whatchamacallit, whatever, is now discriminated. Now we have to cut off policies. Prime example was like there's a school in Louisiana, right? And there's a school right next to a chemical plant. And so under the Biden administration, they said, hey, the school has a right to sue that uh uh that plant, because there's a high risk. That's a high that shows that the high risk of cancer in that community. And because now with Trump, they disband that court case using the language of DEI that is favorable to color people. So you have a situation where you have kids that's in an area where it's a high probability of them getting cancer, and then they're using DEI as a reason to end that court case. So again, language matter. So when you come out and say you're anti-DEIA, that has consequences.
The attacks on people who support diversity, equity, and inclusion. By the way, I thought those were good things. I mean, apparently we all support non-diverse things. We support exclusive things, and we support non-equitable things. I mean, it just the complete sort of flippening of what we all know to be good and true, and witnessing that in real time, the demonization of migrants, the hysteria around Haitians, just the utter dehumanization of this group of people. They're eating dogs and cats, just baseless claims, trying to just stir up hatred towards minority groups and towards immigrants and towards Palestinians and towards Arabs and towards Muslims. And now we have a new Muslim ban coming. We've seen reporting now that individuals from 7 countries, of course, all Muslim majority countries, are now going to be banned from their ability to obtain green cards. Or I mean, we'll find out what the legislation is, or what the executive order is. But it's just so sickening to see this country honestly fall apart. I mean, that's how I would describe it: is the complete unraveling of everything we know to be true. Which is, no, we believe in diversity. We want to have diverse leaders. No, we believe in inclusion. We want to be as inclusive as possible. We believe in equity. We believe that everyone should have equal opportunities in life. I mean, when did these things become bad things?
And it's crazy too. Like when you talk about it, like you see this push on this anti-trans, like across the country, you have these bills across the different states that's trying to eliminate rights for trans. And their reason why is that they don't want them into women's bathroom. It's like, dude, you don't even care about women's rights, but you're posing anti civil rights on a marginalized group. It's like it doesn't make sense. I understand why, because again, you hate trans, that's fine. Like, be out in the open that you don't like trans. But again, it goes back to where we were talking about earlier. When you dehumanize a group, you justify the action.
Yeah.
And that goes along with any marginalized group, whether it's Black, whether it's a woman, whether it's Asian, whether it's Indian, whether it's trans, whether it's a Palestinian. It's all the same thing at the end of the day.
Yeah, and I think ultimately this anti-immigration rhetoric, this anti-diversity rhetoric, anti-inclusion rhetoric, ultimately it's going to blow back in their faces, because what they do not realize is that, like, nobody supports these policies. We need migrant labor in the United States. We have historically low unemployment levels. We have millions of jobs in the United States, which U.S. Americans born and raised refuse to take because they're awful jobs. I mean, let's just call a spade a spade. We're talking about jobs in slaughterhouses where you have people on the front lines losing limbs all the time because of a very dangerous workplace environment. You have migrants picking strawberries and picking pistachios and just grueling labor under the sun, very physical manual labor. Guess who takes those jobs? It's migrants.
Yeah.
And many of whom, by the way, are do not have paperwork to be here. They entered the country illegally. And so this idea that you're going to expel all these people for whom our workforce depends on is the result.
And our Social Security too. Our Social Security too, because all of them pay into Social Security, but they don't get anything back. But again, we draw this illusion that our tax dollars go for their living expenses, and it doesn't, and that's a lie, and that's the reality.
Undocumented immigrants pay taxes. They pay into Social Security. They are upset. In fact, of all, I think there's data suggesting that actually they're much less likely to carry out crimes than lawful residents are, because they're afraid of being deported. So I mean, that actually acts as an incentive to discouraging them from breaking the law. And in fact, and so they're probably, of all people in the United States, the least likely to commit a crime, the most likely to be upstanding citizens, doing the jobs Americans don't want to do, propping up our economy, making our goods and our services cheaper than they would be otherwise, reducing the price of goods for the average American taxpayer. That is what they are doing, and they're demonized for it. It's just shameful.
No, and I agree with you 100%, because at the end of the day, it's a human rights thing. Me personally, I think, if you pay into Social Security, whether you're undocumented or you're a citizen, you should get something back. But that's my feeling on that, because you work you pay into the system, and it should be an easier track for you for undocumented workers to be a citizen. But also at the end of the day, they should get something back because if they're contributing to the economy, then they get something. They should get something back. But that's my feelings on that. Um, but it's just crazy how we look at the world so differently. Like when you talk about human rights, right? When you talk about the history of the Holocaust, and this will never happen again. And right now in real time, this is happening again, and how we uh, separate ourselves from the past to now. And this is the one thing I'm frustrated about is that, if you understand like the ramifications of what happened in the Holocaust, why can you not resonate to what's going on with people in Palestine?
Yeah, and look, the other thing I'll point out here on this topic is that you'll never see the Trump administration go after or attack or demonize a white immigrant, right? You'll never see them attack or demonize a Canadian undocumented immigrant or a British undocumented immigrant or a German or a French or a Spanish undocumented immigrant. It's always racial. They're always going to go after a Mexican or a Pakistani or a Palestinian or a Syrian or someone who's deemed who's non-white and thus who's subhuman. I mean, they do have a white supremacist approach to immigration policies in which white immigrants are upheld as morally outstanding, but owing to the fact that they're never attacked, they're never demonized, their countries are never considered, are never banned from immigration. Whereas you see them just demonizing non-white immigrants.
Yeah.
It's disgusting, and I can't help but think about my own history and my own family. Growing up in places like Poland and Germany before World War II, where Jews were otherized and demonized, called the financiers. They're leeching on our society, likened to subhuman people. Kind of the exact same dehumanizing rhetoric we're seeing from the Trump administration. It's sort of like step one to genocide. Step one to, just getting Americans to accept a mass deportation of millions and millions of morally upstanding, law-abiding citizens.
Right, and I think again,
not citizens, migrants. Excuse me,
migrants. But again, we've done that to citizens in the past, so it's not nothing new. And as a American citizen, we never learn from our past because we're so deep rooted in our bias, and we have that mindset where it's not going to happen to me, so that's not my problem. As long as they're criminals and rapists, get rid of them. And then until it impacts me, then I care. And that's why you see this uprise against Trump right now in town halls and things like that, because he fired a lot of government workers that voted for him, and they're like, oh shit, I didn't realize that.
Yeah. On the topic of firing government workers, since you brought it up, I spent 7.5 years working for a company, and when we had budget problems, when we were we're spending more money than we're making, what you do is you go to the largest budget line item in the budget. That's where you start, because that's gonna be the best place to find unnecessary spending to cut where we can. But of course, and so if you're the U.S. government, if you were to take that approach, the most sensible, obvious approach to trying to figure out ways of cutting down on spending and bringing a budget into balance, which is a very noble goal as a government, we should obviously not be spending more money than we are bringing in tax revenues and import and export tax and fees. I mean, this is sort of obvious. Okay, so where do we start? We should start with the Defense Department. That is by far it's like $850 billion a year are spent by the Defense Department. And Trump is, and then you have Elon going, wow, we saved $30,000 in subscription fees that we were paying to Google or Microsoft. It's like, oh my God, it's a rounding error of a rounding error of a rounding error. And you're not even touching Defense Department spending when we all know the military, when we all know we can't even audit the Defense Department. there's never even been an audit. There's literally tens, if not hundreds of billions of dollars in the Defense Department that is totally unaccounted for. We have no idea where the money is. And you're focusing on cutting $30,000 in subscriptions to Microsoft. It's just like, I thought, Elon, you were supposed to be a good businessman. And obviously he's a brilliant entrepreneur, but when it comes to cutting spending, it's not, there's no logic or rationale or reason behind focusing on these departments that represent a rounding error of a rounding error of a rounding error of the U.S. federal government's budget.
No, and it's just crazy that you can't run the government like a business. You can't. Like, when you run a business, you can cut as much you want, because at the end of the day, it's about maximizing as much profit you can, and it's all about your shareholders. And you can't do that with the government. And so when you think about Doge, they don't know how government works. They don't realize every little thing you mess with impacts millions and millions of people, compared to a corporation where it may impact a fraction of the workforce, and cool, whatever. But when it comes to the actual government, again, it goes back. People need to learn what civics is, and I think people don't know how civic works. They don't know how government works, and so that's why we're in a situation today. Because I don't know if you watched Jubilee, and Sam Cedar was debating 100 MAGA people, and then the one kid would say about how government pays taxes, and Sam Cedar's like, no, they don't pay taxes, because the government is funded by people taxes. And then that kid is like constantly like, no, that's not true. That's not true. It's like, dude, they don't pay taxes because it's funded by the people. And unfortunately, we're in this situation right now, is that people don't know how government runs. And so it's just a total shit show. And it's like affecting millions of people, and we acting like it's normal.
Couldn't agree more.
But brother, thank you for coming on, because I know you got something else to going on next. What's your last thought?
Well, I just want to encourage everyone that in these very scary times, we will be stronger if we are united rather than divided. And thus, it is critical for all of us to continue to fight for justice and freedom in Israel and Palestine. I think the Trump administration had the false belief that by abducting the leaders of some of these protest movements, these anti-genocide protest movements, that they would somehow suffocate the protest movement. But in fact, what we are witnessing is precisely the opposite. And this was very predictable, is that when you try to silence us, we only become louder. And you've seen already in the past week, dozens of protests all around the country. You saw JVP, Jewish Voices for Peace protesters, take over Trump Tower. You saw renewed and reinvigorated protest movements on a half dozen some college campuses already in the past week. These are protest movements that had kind of died down in the past 6 months owing to the extreme repression of the university administrations, but they're now getting revived, and it's because of the repression that is inspiring people to get back out to the streets and protest what is happening. So I would just encourage everyone to continue to protest, continue to speak up. We will be stronger if we are louder. We will be stronger if we are united. And thus, just keep fighting the good fight. And thank you so much again for having me.
No, thank you, brother. Thank you for coming on. Again, how can people find you?
So if you want to follow me, my handle on X, formerly known as Twitter, is _Zach Foster. And you can also subscribe to my newsletter at PalestineNexus.com. And also, I have a few courses on Palestine Nexus. I have a course on Zionism. I have a course on kind of a history of the Israel-Palestine conflict. And also, in about a week and a half, we're launching another course on the history of the Palestinian people. And you can find all of those courses at PalestineNexus.com.
And all those links will be in the link before. And then just to give you some advice, I think you should do the TikTok and do the debate against Zionists, because you know that's the big thing right now, where people's like the debating MAGA. So
It's a
I
great
think
idea.
that for the future reference, I think that's something to think about down the future. But brother, I thank you. I appreciate it. Do your next thing. Again, don't be a stranger. You're always welcome here on the podcast.
Okay. Thanks so much for having me. Cheers.
All right, brother. All right, peace.